Thank you so much for joining us today. We have John Swallow. Just a little bit about him is that John Swallow has worked in the private sector in the corporate general counsel of a multinational company, as well as the public sector as Chief Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General of the state of Utah. So welcome on, John.
Thank you. It's great to be with you today.
Absolutely. Hey, we're just going to jump into our topic today, just right off the bat. And so the question that I have for you is, how does the criminal justice system affect society?
Well, that's a big, broad question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Justice has everything to do with of society, because if you don't have laws and you don't have consequences, if you don't have the ability to expect that there will be fair consequences for wrongful acts or for virtuous acts, society kind of falls apart. You get into chaos. I mean, think about it. If someone knew that they could come into your house and steal your TV and there would be absolutely no consequence, that you wouldn't hurt them or society particularly wouldn't hold them accountable, then you'd have everybody running through the streets, taking anything they wanted to, hurting anybody they wanted to, and creating societal chaos. Justice is the expectation that there will be a fair consequence or result, good or bad, positive or negative, for any act that we do that impacts other people. So when you ask how important justice is to our society, it's truly fundamental. And that's why in America we have a society that's based on the rule of law. So laws are passed, laws are fair, and laws are enforced. And everybody knows about it, so everybody behaves nicely in the sandbox, and that's called justice. And if ever justice is out of balance, it's unfairness, and no one likes unfairness. If there's unfairness, then people are upset, people won't follow the law, and it also complicates the whole society that we live in. And that's why justice truly is paramount to our society here in the United States and certainly throughout the world. And we're seeing impacts of that right now where different people are acting differently in different countries with different powers, and it's impacting the scales of justice, perceived fairness that we see throughout the world.
Interesting. Why is the criminal justice system so important, kind of leading off of what you've just shared with us?
Well, the system of criminal justice, for example, and civil justice is kind of the same way, but it's just dealing with monetary issues. Mm-hmm. So the civil system in justice is where if you are wronged, you have the right to go to court, to hire an attorney, to sue for your damages and for redress, right? That's the civil side. The criminal side is where laws are broken that impact an individual on a level that the legislative bodies, those who create the laws, have deemed to be criminal in nature, or so bad that there ought to be a consequence beyond a monetary relief for someone. So if I, for example, go to the store and I steal food, right? On a civil side, I might be required to reimburse the store for what I took. On the criminal side, I might be charged with a misdemeanor, theft, and then be brought before a court and be tried for that misdemeanor, which could include jail time, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the criminal side of that one transaction, that theft, a civil side and a criminal side. Now, when someone is charged with a crime, what usually happens is they are sentenced to jail if they're convicted, and then the court can also order a civil restitution. So sometimes those civil and criminal penalties are combined into one action on the criminal side. All right, so the justice system works by having courts, by having law enforcement officers who investigate crimes, prosecutors who make decisions about prosecuting a crime, a court system which is a forum where the prosecution can present evidence of the commission of a crime, and the alleged a person who broke the laws, right? The person who is charged with the crime has the opportunity to defend, deny, and force the state or the federal government to prove the crime and prove that the person committed the crime. That's the forum in the court. And the ultimate protection that every citizen has in America is the right to a jury trial. where an independent jury of people just like them in the community can hear the evidence put forth by the prosecution, can hear the defense put forth by the defendant or the person who's accused, right? And then make a determination about guilt. Now, that's how the system works. Once that determination is made by the jury or by the judge if a person waives the jury trial right, which they have, right? Then the consequence can be meted out by the judge, who is the person who creates a sentence, dictates a sentence. How long will the person spend in jail, or if it's a felony, in prison, or will there just be some kind of a restitution or a fine that the guilty party has to pay? And those are kind of the components and elements of the criminal justice system and how it kind of works.
So under what circumstances would an individual waive that right to a jury?
Well, in the criminal justice system, it's a rare thing because the jury truly is the ultimate in protection. As much as a judge wants to be unbiased, a judge is one person. A judge has a lot of experience in, the system, right, where they see multiple defendants every single day. And the protection of having 8 or 12, whatever the number is, and it varies state by state, and sometimes it varies based on the charge and the seriousness of the charge, right? A misdemeanor, and by definition, a misdemeanor, just for those who don't know, misdemeanor means a minor offense. And a felony means a major offense. So sometimes with a misdemeanor, you may not have as many people on a jury required as on a felony case, which is a serious case, right? So to have 8 or 6 or 12 or 10 independent people who are taken from the community, so the point is that we want them to be people just like the person who's been charged, for them to listen to the evidence objectively, feeling a sense of responsibility under their sense of duty as a citizen, to be fair-minded with a fellow citizen, is an ultimate screening for a defendant to rely on a trust. And so in most cases, unless it's a very minor charge, people will insist on having a jury listen and make a decision. And the society accepts the verdict of the jury as very definitive because it represents a cross-section of all the people in the country. So if I'm charged with a crime and I'm found innocent by a jury or not guilty by a jury, which is the same thing because we're innocent until we're proven guilty, I have to be satisfied that a cross-section of objective people have listened to the evidence and have determined that I'm guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And society will take that to the bank. And so once someone's convicted by a jury, they're conclusively proven to be guilty. Now, we don't want to go into this vein on that question, but there are circumstances where the jury gets it wrong. And there are laws now that have been implemented in the fairly recent past that allow a court with new evidence to find someone who was even convicted by a jury to be found factually innocent, that the jury got it wrong for some reason. And there are I think right now, more than 3,800 people in the country over the last, I think, 30 years who have been convicted through either a plea deal, we'll talk about that maybe later, or through a conviction by a jury, a finding by a jury, who have been found and declared by a judge to be factually innocent, notwithstanding the verdict. So juries do get it wrong sometimes, but in most cases they get it right.
Interesting. What's the defining line and difference between a misdemeanor and what was the other one?
Felony.
A felony. Yeah. What's the difference between the two?
Well, so all criminal law is established in most cases. Now there are federal crimes that are set forth in regulations that are done under authority of the legislature, but in most cases the legislature, so if it's a federal crime, it would be the Congress, that's the legislature, the Senate and House, In the states, it's the legislature or the assembly, right? In a city or county, it can be the council, right? City council or the county commission. That's the legislative body. They set what the definitions are of crimes. But generally, misdemeanors are laws that are broken, that are deemed to be inconsequential enough that they wouldn't carry a prison term. Okay, so you're talking about shoplifting. You're talking about disrupting the peace, certain types of assault, wherever it gets into more serious assault like rape or, serious injury or theft over a certain amount, right? The legislature defines that as a serious enough crime that would incur a prison sentence. And I know that's a very general way to say it. I mean, that's a really basic way to say it because there are other differences and distinctions. But certainly when you've done something that the society through the legislature has said is serious enough to carry a prison sentence, they deem that a felony. And felonies have different levels, right? All the way up to murder and cold-blooded murder, right? So, and that's one of the most serious offenses you can receive, and even receive a death penalty in some states for something that consequential.
Wow.
So it's always better to be charged with a misdemeanor than with a felony, and it's always better not to be charged with anything. That's the very best, right?
True.
Yeah.
And it's always best to keep the law and to be a good person, right? But who is the criminal justice system made for?
Well, the whole point of the system is to protect everyone's rights and preserve freedoms for everyone. Think of it like a basketball game. If I don't know if you've ever been involved in a game on the playground where there were no rules and people could be hanging on people's arms and people could be punching people and stealing the ball from them. People could be running down the court without dribbling the ball, taking too many steps. There are rules that are set up so that the game is fair, predictable, and it kind of balances things out for everyone. And those are the rules. And so for our society to exist in peace and in order, they've set forth laws. So on a traffic side of things, you have to, in America, you have to drive on the right side as you're heading in a direction. If there weren't any laws that said which side of the road you drove on, can you imagine how dangerous it would be to drive in a car? If there weren't rules that said when there's a red light, you have to stop, and on a green light you go, those are rules, right? And there are consequences for violating those rules. And that's a very simple way of saying that the justice system is set up to create a consequence so that people can expect that if they don't follow the laws, or if someone else doesn't follow the laws, there will be a consequence. And that's enough of an incentive to follow the laws or a disincentive not to follow the laws that will make people conform to those laws and create order in a society that otherwise would be full of chaos, and no one would know the rules and no one would follow the rules, and things wouldn't be fair. So the justice system really is set up for all of us in the society. So there's fairness, so there's a consequence, and so that people can anticipate a predictable result based on how they live and how they act, so that the society can function in a way that's not chaotic, it's in order, it's predictable, and it's designed so that everyone will be happy and know the rules and follow them and live in peace together as a society. That's what the justice system does. And the justice system also provides a serious consequence for those who violate certain laws, which is meant to deter people from violating those laws and to really benefit everyone through the order that's established through those laws.
So it's for everybody.
Right, and it's a very esoteric answer, but it gets down to the policy or the fundamental. And by the way, my experience, my background has also been to be a member of the legislature earlier in my career, and so it was a great honor for me to be able to sit in debates and introduce legislation and really consider the whys of why we pass our laws instead of just simply what the laws are. As a lawyer, as I represent clients, and as an attorney general and a chief deputy attorney general, as I was involved in enforcing those laws on behalf of the people of the state I lived in and served.
That's awesome. And I mean, finding freedom through structure, right? Being able to have a successful basketball game, like you said, because of the rules. I think that's great. And so how does the criminal justice system keep order? How is that maintained? Because there's a system set up, but people are fallible. We ebb and flow. How is consistency maintained?
Well, that comes down to some assumptions. And one assumption is that the law will be executed fairly, that justice will be blind. One of the challenges we have in our justice system today, and I'm sure we'll have chances to talk about it later, is that sometimes the law isn't evenly applied, isn't fairly applied. People have biases. Sometimes it's based on race. Sometimes it's based on gender. Sometimes it's based on age. And so whenever there's a contaminant in the evaluation process, that can result in injustice, right? And so the issue becomes how do we as a society ensure that our justice system, which is designed to make things fair for everyone and predictable, isn't corrupted by abuse and by biases. And that's probably a topic for another day, but it can happen, it does happen, and it's terrible when it does happen, because whenever someone abuses the power that we as the people give to the justice system actors, prosecutors, investigators, law enforcement officers, police, whenever that's abused, then that becomes something that drives away unfairness and creates injustice, which then creates things like we've heard in the not too distant past, where let's defund the police. Mm-hmm. Let's riot because people are so biased that they're attacking ethnic minorities in the inner cities. And we're going to stand up and we're going to riot and we're going to break the law and we're going to have civil disobedience because we're going to stand up and fight against injustice. And it becomes very emotional for the victims and their families and friends. And so you can choose, society has to choose, are we going to change the laws through violence and through unrest and through civil disobedience? Or are we going to go through the constitutional process of contacting our legislators, talking about the injustice, and asking them to change the laws to make things more fair, to establish consequences, accountability for law enforcement officers, for police officers, for even investigators and prosecutors who show bias and create injustice? Are we going to, because right now most people don't realize that there are few checks and balances on police power, few checks and balances on prosecution power. We give prosecutors in this country what's called unqualified immunity, which means there is no real accountability for a prosecutor who abuses his or her office to charge someone wrongly or maliciously. So when you give that kind of power to a prosecutor, is there really a deterrent from that prosecutor abusing the power to go after an ethnic minority or someone who doesn't follow their philosophy, or maybe a campaign opponent or a political adversary? And there's not. And that's a real problem in America today.
Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for people who want to see changes happen? How, say like me, just a regular Joe Schmo, how would I help the changes I want to see happen?
Well, I can tell you what not to do. It's not a very wise thing to attack anyone physically, mm-hmm. to show up and throw stones, right? There's an organized process for change in this country. It's called the separation of powers. There's the legislative branch, and that branch is available in cities, counties, states, and the federal government as well. There's the legislative branch that creates the laws. The executive branch enforces the laws. And so when you're having a problem with how the laws are enforced, the best thing you can do is, speak up about it, talk about it, contact a lawmaker about it, talk to your neighbors and friends about it, and try to come up with a way to influence change positively. That is the way we deal with things in America. And then if you are falsely accused, defend yourself. And it's very expensive, very hard. It's easy for me to say that, but if you're in inner city and don't have a job and, your family's been on, government support, that's one of the challenges we have. There are public defenders and they're really great people, but in many cases, they're overworked and they're underpaid and they have 1,500 files on their desk. And sometimes they don't have the time to put into the cases they would like to put into it. And that causes a kind of a breach in the justice that we're expecting as Americans in our justice system. Those things need to be changed and fixed. So as a person, what influence can you make? Speak up, defend yourself, get to know your lawmaker, and fight for change in an organized way. And change does come. It may come slowly, but it does come and can come.
Perfect. Hey, thank you so much, John, for just helping us understand more of this and help clear the air. If you want to see more of what John has to offer and the more of the expertise that he brings to the table, either click the link down below or in our bio. Thank you.